Situated on the southwest tip of Ireland, where the Atlantic meets the unforgiving mountains and coastline, lies a landscape sculpted by wind and rain. A region known for its rugged beauty and abundant marine life. Fin whales, humpback whales, minke whales, dolphins and porpoises visit West Cork's coastal waters at different times throughout the year. Atlantic grey and harbour seals breed on the small islands dotted along the coast, while many bird species make the waters around the islands of West Cork a summer home, prior to their autumn migration south over the equator. During the course of this series, I'll not only be looking at the marine life that lives here, I'll also be asking, why is this region such a magnet for some of the world's most incredible marine species, and how we can all do our part in conserving the environment here in what is a truly wild West Cork. The estuary at Rosscarbery is a magnet for many estuarine bird species, one of which was an infrequent visitor, but is now an established resident. The Little Egret is now considered an established Irish bird. This handsome member of the heron family is now regularly sighted on rivers, inlets and estuaries around the Irish coast. It is easy to forget that the first breeding record for this species in Ireland was as recent as 1997 at a site in County Cork. Data gathered during the last 20 years have yielded some interesting patterns and trends in our populations of native Irish and itinerant bird species. Not all have been positive, but there are none more remarkable than that of the Little Egret. Detailed ringing studies in Ireland have yielded some important data about breeding ecology and dispersal of young birds. Although the majority of resightings are here in Ireland, in 2010 a young bird was located in the Azores, a journey of over 2,000 kilometres. And as recently as 2013, a young bird fledged from the Galway colony was located as far north as Iceland.
A swains and thrush on Cape. Yeah, there's a couple of guys who want to go out, they've missed the ferry.
Paul Connaughton has been a birding enthusiast since he was a small boy and has followed the Little Egret story in West Cork since those early sightings, travelling many miles in the 1980s to get a glimpse of this bird when it was still regarded as rare in Ireland.
My first Little Egret was way back in 1989 actually. Kind of a funny story. I remember myself and a friend of mine hearing about this Little Egret that had turned up in a place called Tecumseh in Wexford. So we borrowed some bicycles from some friends of ours and we cycled. It was about 50 kilometres of a cycle, there and back like 100 kilometres. But we got there and we seen this amazing white heron with these black legs and these bright yellow feet. It's just something we'd never, you know, it was up there with one of the really target birds we wanted to see growing up. You know, they were quite common through Europe, and you know, looking in books, it's just one of those birds that really was high on the radar for things you wanted to see. But to see them in Ireland was incredible, you know.
The literature would suggest that the Little Egret was fairly common in Northern Europe in the Middle Ages. It is thought that hunting for its meat and plumage were the main causes for its decline. Most of us think of the Little Egret as a temperate or even tropical bird, so their recent northward expansion into colder regions is all the more fascinating.
Well, we're here now in Rosscarbery in West Cork, and this is probably one of the first places actually in Ireland where it had a couple of resident little egrets. You know, I remember travelling down here to see them, and they love this kind of coastal habitat. You know, especially if there's kind of a freshwater salt marsh type scenario as well. It's their preferred habitats, and it's habitats like this where nearby where they first bred for the first time in Ireland. That was in 1997. There was a small colony was found in East Cork, almost on a Cork-Waterford border, and the following year there was 3 other colonies found, and this all happened very, very fast. And between 97 and 2001, they really did start to establish a thriving population in Ireland. And since then they've slowly but steadily spread, and now they breed not over the entire island of Ireland, but over a lot of counties have breeding populations now. And they've gone from being a rarity to being a regularity, you know. Maybe a scarcity in some parts of the far north, but mostly if you go to any estuarine habitat in Ireland now, you'd expect to see little egrets. And in fact they actually outnumber grey herons now. Most of the colonies where they breed like egrets like to breed with other species of herons, other species of egrets as well. And a lot of the colonies, they way outnumber the grey herons now, you know, which is very interesting. It just goes to show how successful they've been in colonising Ireland. It's been fantastic, really.
Climate change, lack of competition, reduced human pressure from hunting may all contribute to the expansion of the little egret northwards. Although a very welcome addition to the species recorded in Ireland, they are not the only small heron from the tropics to exploit the Irish environment.
Cattle egrets breed mostly around large wetland areas throughout Spain and the south of France, and other places across Europe. They feed on large insects mostly, like grasshoppers and things like that. So the reason they're coming here in winter is, for one thing, it saves them having to go the whole way down to Africa and further beyond the Sahara, which a lot of the cattle egrets do. That's quite a taxing journey, you know, and I'm sure like there's a high mortality rate with these birds when they actually do this. But coming up here for the winter, we've got really mild winters, and they seem to be finding enough food to survive, because those birds have been surviving through the winter, and in late spring they've been heading back towards the breeding grounds. That's why we reckon a lot of them are not fully mature birds, but maybe younger birds, 2 or 3 years old, that are not quite ready to breed yet. So, you know, it only takes a matter of time before those birds will mature. And if they've set up a routine of travelling to Ireland to spend the winter, they might hang on later in the spring and they might start to breed as well.
The current expansion of the little egret is thought by some to be a microcosm of a wider evolutionary process, and we may see further expansion of this species as the Irish population grows. One thing is certain, the little egret story in Ireland is not over yet.
Our winters have been very mild for quite a while now, but there's nothing to say that in the future we might get a 10-year period where the winters get very cold. It does happen. And if that happens, that might put an end to Ireland's wintering little egrets. You know, if things get too cold, they're going to start migrating south again. So as long as it's nice and mild here, you know, wet and mild, it's not for everyone, but it suits birds very well. We get huge populations of birds from all over Northern Europe that come and spend the winter here because it's so mild, and the wet doesn't really bother them.
Many Rosscarbery residents take the presence of the little egret for granted. This was not always the case.
I went to Kenya working in the 80s, and I returned in the middle 90s. And when I left, there wasn't a single egret in the lagoon in Rosscarbery where I lived, up there in the convent. And when I came back, it wasn't full of egrets. There were a lot of egrets, and I note they nested over there where the herons nest, in the same bush. So it was lovely to see them greeting me when I came home.
Next time, we join Kilmackabie Rowing Club to get an insight into a sport that is part of the fabric of the community of West Cork.
Bye.